They called him Mail Harold behind his back, the quiet guy who delivered letters for 40 years. At VFW meetings, he'd sit alone while others told their war stories. He never interrupted, never corrected them. But when his heart stopped at 70, the truth that spilled from his pockets changed everything they thought they knew about courage. But this story didn't start that night. The real story began in 1950, in the freezing cold of Korea. Welcome to Silent Warriors. Before we dive into this powerful story of forgotten honor, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. Harold Kowalski was 72 years old, and everyone in Millfield thought they knew him. At least, they thought they did. Every morning at 6 a.m., he'd have the same coffee, follow the same route, deliver the mail. For 40 years, never late, never complained. The townspeople called him Reliable Harold, but the other veterans at VFW Post 247 weren't as kind. What they didn't know was that Harold was still fighting that war every single night in his dreams. Every third Thursday of the month, Harold would come to the VFW hall, always sat at the same corner table, ordered one beer, listened quietly. While other veterans shared their stories, Vietnam memories, Gulf War experiences, Afghanistan tours, Harold would just nod. Frank Morrison, 68-year-old Vietnam vet, would usually say, "Hey Harold, you never tell any war stories. Were you just a supply clerk in Korea or something?" Harold always gave the same answer. "I had work to do over there, Frank." That's all. Behind that simple answer was a truth nobody could have imagined. November 15th, 2023. Thursday evening. Harold came to the VFW hall like always. Snow was falling outside, just like that night, 73 years ago. But Harold didn't share that observation with anyone. That evening the hall was more crowded than usual. A young soldier, Jake Anderson, had just returned from Afghanistan and was attending his first meeting. He was struggling with PTSD, couldn't sleep at night. Jake noticed the old man sitting in the corner. "Who's that?" he asked Frank. "Oh, that's just Harold. Mail carrier. Served in Korea but doesn't talk much. Probably did warehouse duty or something." What Jake didn't know was that he was looking at the hero of one of the coldest and deadliest battles in world history. Harold noticed Jake's familiar look, the look that comes from night terrors, from jumping at sudden sounds, from always being on guard. He saw the slight tremor in the young soldier's hands. During the meeting, Jake stood up. His voice was shaking. I can't sleep anymore. I feel like I left my buddies over there, not being able to save them." The hall went quiet. Harold got up from his table and slowly approached Jake. "Son," Harold said, his voice unusually strong, "sometimes the greatest courage is being able to come home." These were the most personal words Harold had spoken in years, but the reason was a terrible truth that very few people knew. Jake was moved by Harold's words. As the old man returned to his table, he suddenly stumbled. His hand went to his chest. "Harold!" Frank shouted. Harold collapsed. He couldn't breathe. An ambulance was called, but Harold's pulse was weak. Jake, with his military medical training, rushed to Harold's side. He started CPR. Harold's jacket had come open, and Jake noticed something metallic glinting beneath the old man's shirt. "What's this?" he murmured. Frank and the others came closer. From Harold's jacket's inner pocket, an old leather wallet fell. And from inside the wallet, what fell out at that moment was a discovery nobody expected. The first thing that dropped was the Congressional Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. The bright blue ribbon with its star gleamed under the hall lights. Then came the silver star. Then the bronze star. And then the Purple Heart. Actually, 3 Purple Hearts. Frank's mouth fell open. This is impossible. Jake looked deeper into Harold's wallet. There, a 73-year-old yellowed photograph. On a snow-covered hill, surrounded by frozen bodies, a 22-year-old soldier. And that soldier was Harold. But the story in this photograph was far more dramatic than they could imagine. The ambulance arrived. As paramedics loaded Harold onto a stretcher, Jake read the back of the photograph. Chosin Reservoir, 1950. Harold Kowalski, 2nd Lieutenant, sole survivor, 200 soldiers saved. Nobody left the hall. Everyone was in shock. That night, Jake couldn't go home. He started researching Harold's story. What he found about Chosin Reservoir shook him to his core. The event from November 1950 was known in military history as the Frozen Chosin, and it was a horrific story. November 27, 1950. Chosin Reservoir region of North Korea. Temperature -35 degrees. 15,000 American soldiers were surrounded by 120,000 Chinese troops. Second Lieutenant Harold Kowalski commanded a section of Fox Company. He was tasked with holding Toktong Pass with 200 soldiers. But when Chinese forces attacked at night, everything changed. Jake found Harold's name in military records. Second Lieutenant Kowalski evacuated his wounded soldiers under enemy fire. For 3 days and 3 nights without sleep, he gave his own body heat to soldiers suffering from frostbite. When surrounded by Chinese soldiers, he single-handedly attacked enemy positions to create an escape route for his men. But the true scope of what Harold did lay in details that never made it into official records. Jake dug deeper. He found testimonies from surviving soldiers. Harold gave us hope. When we were at death's door, he fought for us. He gave us his rations. When the Chinese came, he used himself as a human shield to protect us. For 17 hours, he commanded 200 men single-handedly. Another testimony. Kowalski massaged our frozen feet. The only reason we didn't get gangrene was because of him. He kept us alive. And the most striking detail was hidden in the decision Harold made that night. The final testimony made Jake cry. Harold had his own chance to escape. The helicopter had reserved a spot for him, but when he saw there was no room for 20 wounded soldiers, he said, "I'll be the last one out." When the helicopter took off, Harold was still on the ground. He reached camp on foot 3 hours later. He collapsed from hypothermia. The Congressional Medal of Honor citation was clear and cold. Displaying extraordinary heroism and self-sacrifice, he saved the lives of 200 soldiers, carried wounded soldiers under enemy fire, and ensured his men's safety while disregarding his own life. But the price of Harold's heroism was deep wounds he never shared with anyone for years. The next morning, Harold woke up in the hospital. He'd had a heart attack but was stable. Jake was waiting beside him. "Harold," Jake said quietly, we found out who you are." Harold looked with tired eyes. "Jake, right? The kid who came back from Afghanistan." "Yes, sir." "Sir, why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Harold looked out the window. Snow was still falling. "Because Jake, the ones who died that night can't tell stories anymore." Behind Harold's words was a painful truth he'd carried for 73 years. "They say I saved 200 men," Harold said, "but 47 of my buddies stayed behind. Their names aren't on any medal." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, you didn't forget them. You keep them alive every day." Harold turned his head. "You know what my hardest decision was that night, Jake? Whether to leave my wounded buddies and get on that helicopter or stay with them and die together. What did you do?" "I did neither. I found a third way. I saved them." Harold's third-way choice that night was a strategy that would go down in military tactical history. Harold continued. "Chinese soldiers had us surrounded on 3 sides. The only exit was through a minefield. But I had 20 wounded. Couldn't carry them." "What did you do?" "I attacked the Chinese position myself, alone, drew their attention to me. My soldiers carried the wounded while I distracted them." Jake held his breath. "Did you make it out alive?" "Took 3 bullets, but my plan worked. 200 men were saved. What came after this heroism would completely change Harold's life." "I was in the hospital for 6 months, Harold said. "When President Truman gave me the medals, I was still in a wheelchair." "You must have been proud." Harold gave a bitter smile. "Jake, those medals don't belong to me. They belong to the 47 buddies I left on that hill. I'm just the carrier." The reason Harold saw the medals this way was the survivor's guilt that haunted him for years. "I see them every night," Harold said. "Tommy Mitchell, 19 years old. He was shot in the leg. I carried him on my back. But I had to leave Johnny Crawford behind. He was 19 too. Jake's voice cracked. Sir, you did everything you could. It wasn't enough, Jake. It's never enough. The door opened. Frank Morrison entered. Behind him were the other VFW members. They all brought flowers. Frank came to Harold's bedside. Harold, why didn't you ever tell us? Harold's answer would explain the real reason for silence among veterans. Frank, Harold said, what did you go through in Vietnam? Frank was surprised. I had tough times, but compared to what you went through, no, Frank. Your pain isn't less than mine. Pain isn't a competition. We all carry the same burden. The hall went quiet. Harold continued. These medals don't make me special. I was just lucky that night, and I live this luck in memory of the buddies who couldn't come home. Harold's words revealed a truth that would touch every veteran's heart in that room. Jake approached Harold. Sir, I thought I couldn't save my buddies in Afghanistan. But you... Jake, Harold interrupted him, you came home. That alone is a great achievement. Being alive means keeping the memory of the fallen alive. Frank wiped his eyes. Harold, we've known you wrong for 30 years. You don't need to know me, Frank. We just need to understand each other. Harold's humility showed what true heroism really means. That evening, something unexpected happened in the hospital room. As Jake kept watch beside Harold, the old man was dreaming in his sleep. Johnny, come here. Harold was murmuring. I won't leave you. Jake understood the nightmare Harold had been living every night for 73 years. The old man was still on that snowy hill, still trying to save his buddies. When Harold woke up in the morning, he found Jake beside him. Bad dream, sir? Harold nodded. Same dream every night, Jake. But it's not a bad dream anymore. It's the only way to see them again. This moment showed the true meaning of Harold's 73-year journey. 2 weeks later, Harold was released from the hospital. When he went to his first VFW meeting, the hall had completely changed. There were Korean War photographs on the tables. A banner reading Chosin Few hung on the wall. When Harold entered, the hall stood up. No, Harold said, this isn't necessary. But Jake stepped forward. Sir, we're not just standing for you. We're standing for the 47 buddies who died with you. The tears gathering in Harold's eyes showed that the emotions he'd suppressed for years were finally coming out. Frank went to the microphone. Friends, Harold Kowalski, who has lived among us for 30 years, is a true hero. But the most important thing I learned today is this. He doesn't see himself as a hero. And that's exactly why he's a real hero. Harold was crying. For the first time in 73 years, he could share what he experienced that night with others. Tommy Mitchell, Harold said slowly, Johnny Crawford, Mike O'Brien, Robert Lee, James Washington, ... The hall listened quietly. Harold named each of the 47 buddies who died that night. This moment was a healing moment not just for Harold, but for all veterans. Jake was completely changed after Harold's story. He could sleep at nights now. The technique Harold taught him was simple. What you've lived through defines you but cannot imprison you. One evening, Jake visited Harold at his home. In Harold's garage was an old trunk. What's this, sir? Harold opened the trunk. Inside were dozens of letters, all written to different families but none sent. 47, Harold said, each one for the family of a buddy who died that night. I've been writing for 73 years, but never had the courage to send them. Jake's suggestion would be the final step that would change Harold's life. Sir, Jake said, maybe it's time to send them. Harold picked up one of the letters. Read the one to Mrs. Mitchell. Jake read, Dear Mrs. Mitchell, your son Tommy was a hero. That night he sacrificed his own life to protect me. He was 19 and constantly talked about you and his father. His last words were, Tell my mom I love her. I'm sorry I'm writing this letter 73 years too late, but I never forgot Tommy's heroism. Jake's eyes filled with tears. Sir, these letters belong to those families. Harold's decision would end 73 years of silence. The following week, Harold and Jake went to the post office together. 47 letters were sent to 47 families. 2 days later, the phone started ringing. The first caller was Sharon, Mrs. Mitchell's daughter. She was 65 years old. "Mr. Kowalski, this is Sharon Mitchell. I'm Tommy's sister. My mother died 10 years ago, but she always wondered about her son." Harold's voice was trembling. "Sharon, your brother was a true hero." "Mr. Kowalski, we want to thank you too. You didn't forget them." This phone call was the end of a 73-year nightmare for Harold. Over the following days, dozens of calls came. Every family thanked Harold. Some cried, some came to hug him. Mike O'Brien's nephew said, "We didn't know anything about my uncle. Now we're proud of him." Robert Lee's son. "Learning how my father died is the greatest gift our family has received." Harold was sleeping peacefully for the first time in 73 years. But the final chapter of Harold's story came in the most unexpected way. Jake had written Harold's story for the local newspaper. The article had such an impact that national media took interest. CNN wanted to interview Harold. Harold declined. "Jake, I didn't do this to become famous." But something changed Harold's mind. Letters from young veterans. A female Afghanistan veteran wrote, "Sir, your story saved my life. I can now cope with survivor's guilt." An Iraq veteran. "Harold, sir, you gave us hope. You showed us we can be honorable in our old age too." Harold realized that helping young veterans was also completing his own healing. Harold turned to Jake. "Okay, I'll accept the interview, but with one condition." "What's that, sir?" "I'll talk not just about myself, but about the 47 buddies who died that night." The CNN interview was watched by millions. Harold was modest, humble, and moving. The interviewer asked, "Mr. Kowalski, do you see yourself as a hero?" Harold answered, "No. The heroes stayed on that snowy hill. I just lived to tell their story." This interview would create an unexpected change in Harold's life. After the interview, Harold received hundreds of letters, all from young veterans. An invitation came from the Pentagon. Harold was asked to speak to former soldiers. "Jake," Harold said, "at 73, I'm starting a new mission." He gave his first speech at Walter Reed Military Hospital. The audience was young soldiers receiving PTSD treatment. "Kids," Harold said, "I stayed silent for 73 years. That was wrong. Because silence doesn't heal pain. It just hides it." The young soldiers in the hall listened carefully. Harold's speech would change the lives of dozens of young veterans. "The most important thing I'll tell you is this," Harold said. "Being alive is not a crime. The trauma you experience doesn't make you weak, and most importantly, you're not alone." After the speech, a young female soldier stood up. "Sir, I lost 3 friends in Syria. Why am I living instead of them?" Harold's eyes filled with tears. "Because someone needs to tell their story. You're that person." This was the moment Harold found his new purpose. Months passed. Harold was now giving speeches nationwide. In every speech, he recited the names of those 47 buddies. He erected a monument at VFW Post 247. It bore the names of the 47 soldiers who died at Chosin. Jake started working alongside Harold. Together, they helped veterans. One day, Harold said to Jake, "You know, I've stopped seeing them in my dreams." "Why, sir?" "Because now they're not living with me, I'm living with them." Harold's change marked the end of his long healing journey. Harold's story reached its peak with the founding of the Chosen Few Foundation. This foundation helped veterans with PTSD. "Our goal is simple," Harold said. "No veteran should be left alone." At his 75th birthday party, Harold showed Jake his Congressional Medal of Honor. "This doesn't belong to me anymore, Jake. This belongs to everyone who serves." Harold's final act would show the true meaning of his heroism. Harold Kowalski passed away peacefully at age 76, but even his death was extraordinary. In his final days in the hospital, his room was filled with veterans, dozens of young soldiers whose lives had been changed and transformed by his story. Jake sat beside him. "Sir, is there anything you regret?" Harold smiled. "Just one thing. I wish I'd started talking 73 years ago." Harold's last words summarized his true legacy. "Jake," Harold said with his final breath, "donate the medals to the museum, but with one condition." "What is it, sir?" "Write the names of my 47 buddies next to them. Don't let them be forgotten either." Harold Kowalski passed away that night, but his story didn't end. 2,000 people attended his funeral, veterans, families, and the young people whose lives he had changed. The coffin was draped with the American flag, and a 47-person honor guard saw him off. But Harold's greatest legacy wasn't at that funeral. It was in the hearts that continued to live. Jake spoke at the funeral. Harold Kowalski taught us that true heroism isn't silence, it's speaking at the right time, it's sharing pain, and most importantly, it's never leaving anyone alone. The Chosen Few Foundation today helps thousands of veterans. Harold's medals are displayed at the Smithsonian Museum alongside the names of his 47 buddies. And perhaps most importantly, the lives changed because of Harold's story. Jake now works as president of the foundation. At every meeting, he repeats Harold's words. "What you've lived through defines you, but it cannot imprison you." At VFW, Post 247, Harold's table still sits in the same corner. There's a small plaque on it. Harold Male Harold Kowalski, Silent Hero, Big Heart. New veterans come every month, and Jake tells them Harold's story. How he learned to speak after 73 years of silence, how he turned his pain into strength. Because Harold's greatest lesson was this: it's never too late to speak. Harold Kowalski's story shows us that true heroes live everywhere. Your mail carrier, your cashier, your neighbor. Maybe they too carry a great story in silence, and most importantly, if you too are struggling with trauma you've experienced, you're not alone. Like Harold, it's never too late to speak. Now I ask you, have you ever known an elderly veteran whose real story you don't know? Share their names in the comments. Because maybe they too, like Harold, carry a great story in silence. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, because at Silent Warriors, we'll continue to remind people of forgotten heroes. And let's end with Harold's words. Medals don't make us heroes, helping others does. Until we meet in the next story. And remember, if you ever see an old man sitting quietly at a shooting range, in a diner, or in a park, look a little more carefully. Maybe you're facing a living legend. Because the most powerful stories don't shout, they wait.